Well, it is currently 8:55 in the morning, but anyways, this is chapter 12 of The Ballad of Echo the Diamond Dog. Warning Signals. Ever been to a block party? Probably the most fun you'll ever have, especially in the city during the summer. A lot of them are completely unplanned. They start slow, maybe just with an old man setting out a grill and a cooler in his front stoop. Then his family comes out and joins him. Soon enough, kids will come out of their apartments and start romping on the street, playing stickball or tag in between parked cars. They are often followed by their parents, who emerge from their homes like bats out of a cave to scold their offspring for breaking a window or something, but soon find themselves placated by their friends across the street, who also came out. After them, the teens, who despite their traditional indifference, suddenly feel lonely and ignored. And before you know it, there's a throng of people outside, relaxing, drinking, laughing on curbs and sidewalks and stoops. The air is golden and warm, and somebody brought out a boom box and they're playing some terrible music, but it doesn't matter because you're having too much fun. Eventually, some enterprising Samaritan with a wrench bursts open the fire hydrant, and half the street is covered in a fine spray. People start dancing, singing, uncaring that their clothes are getting wet. The youngest barely even have anything on, screeching and whooping and as they run through the water wonderland. The oldest folks simply take off their shoes and dip their feet in the puddles, content in the happiness of the evening. In between you have the adults and teens, rocking shorts and cutoffs, and everyone's letting their hair down and acting like the kids they once were. It's a glorious thing, like watching someone age in reverse. The worries just drip off them like the mud from a dirty child as their mother gives them a bath. Lucky for me, this is pretty much what happened in Wethoof. Unluckily for me, there's always just one douchebag who ends up wrecking it. About 15 minutes after the meeting, the town had turned from a sleepy walled helmet into a raging equestrian version of Mardi Gras. As I made my way down the narrow roads and narrower bridges that connected the town's many raised platforms together, I could not help but be awestruck. The sun slowly lowered behind the western wall, set the sky afire in glorious hues of purple, pink, orange, and red. The town itself lay in the shadows thrown out by the wall, but was shining with a brilliance of its own. Colorful lights winked from the windows and over in the streets, like the lights of a Christmas tree. The varnished wood of the bridges and platforms shimmered a deep amber, and it looked as though I was walking on honey. Confetti, balloons, and whoops of joy filled the air as the ponies frolicked in the streets, celebrating the downfall of one of Equestria's greatest enemies and possibly of their deliverance. And a possibility. All shapes and sizes and colors were present. Foals, stallions, mares, colts, and fillies alike all celebrated gleefully on the wooden platforms of Wethoof. The scientist inside of me noted that there was an even representation of both genders, unlike Ponyville. Regardless, I'd had no idea there were even this many in this town. The few times I'd been here, there were very few ponies outside, but now, Jesus, it was like the streets of New York City at the end of World War I. The atmosphere was intoxicating, generously sucking away any inhibitions I had about and replacing them with the simple, pure joy of being alive. The lack of hostility towards me was astonishing. Maybe the guards spread the word that I had an important role in this. As I dazedly made my way through the crowd, I became aware of someone yelling my name. I turned and was suddenly assaulted by a tan bundle of feathers wrapping me in a tight hug. "Can you believe this?" Daring Do happily yelled in my ear over the glorious cacophony of noise. "It's like some pony flipped a switch and this place went back to the way it used to be!" I gently set her down on the boardwalk, shaking my head in disbelief. "A few days ago this place was a ghost town." I smiled a bit at the perk of not having to shout anymore to make myself understandable of a crowd. "I know, right?" She looked around. "Hey, let's go somewhere a little quieter. I know a place close to here. A tavern. You in?" "Lead the way, my fine feathered friend. I have news to share as well." Keeping up with her was surprisingly hard. Despite the fact that I towered over every single pony in town and could see easily in the crowd, the sheer number of ponies outside, dancing and hollering and generally having a ball, made my size a disadvantage. I bobbed and weaved and knocked a few ponies over, apologizing profusely each time, but eventually I managed to track her to one of the smaller platforms that made up Wethoof. Here was only a single building, a rotund, hut-like structure with a sloping circular roof and a fire-hole on top, from which a healthy spout of smoke and fumes were pouring. I went in, and found it surprisingly bigger on the inside. Dr. Hooves. The single circular wall of the tavern was lined with comfortable booths, most of them filled with groups of celebrating ponies. In the center of the room, a large circular counter encompassed an open kitchen, furnished with a massive fire pit, over which various rainforest edibles were cooking on a spit roast. The smoke from the pit made the room comfortably hazy, and was vented out of the building by the fire hole in the ceiling. Some pony gave a sharp whistle, and I turned to find Daring Do waving me over to one of the booths on the far side of the room. I padded over, gracefully avoiding colliding with a serving mare, hauling a platter of food on her withers. I breathed in as I passed her, and my nose was enlightened by the astonishing aromas emanating from the steaming banquet. Slipping into the booth, across from Daring, I lowered my hood, as I noticed Daring removing her hat. I was determined to make a positive impression to the town's ponies, and manners are always a good start. I was unprepared, however, when a stallion approached our table and gave a low bow. He did so with a regal flourish, and straightened. He was an extremely tall but thin unicorn, and had the gray coloring of an overcast sky. His mane was pale, almost translucent, and hung straight like a curtain. And from the look of the tie-dye cloak he was wearing, he had no sense of style whatsoever. Deep pink eyes regarded us with a strange combination of wisdom and insanity. Wait a bucking minute. Ah, hello, every pony. Mind if I drop in for some grub? He somehow slunk his way into the booth on Daring's side. The explorer eyed him suspiciously. Can we help you? She asked him flatly. Actually, yes. He made no further elaboration, instead opting to simply sit there with a perky grin. Daring and I exchanged a glance. You could explain just a wee bit more, you know. He chuckled. Well, for starters, I'm positively famished. Let's place an order, shall we? Daring Do bristled, and her wings flared up instinctively, something Pegasi do to make themselves more threatening. Look, I don't know who you think you are, just waltzing up here like this, but if you think we're going to hoof out a free meal like that... I quickly silenced her with an upraised paw, observing the stranger with interest. Something about him was eerily familiar. That sounds like discord to me, kind of. You're more than welcome here, traveler. If you need some food, I'm sure we can spare a few morsels. I gave Daring a withering glance. Generosity is a virtue, after all. The explorer abruptly wilted, an embarrassed blush on her face. The stallion gave a hearty, bellowing laugh. Ha! Wow! By the sun and the moon, Fluffy, you never cease to surprise me. I smirked. Only one being would call me that. Hello, Disarray. I was close. Daring Do eyed the stallion with confusion. Disarray? But isn't he, not a pony? He reached inside the darkness of his cloak and pulled out a 2x4, which had a poorly drawn face scrawled over it, and held the piece of wood up to his ear. What's that, Plank? He nodded a few times. All right, I'll tell them. The stallion turned to us and smiled. Plank says that you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, or for that matter, a particular half Draconicus, half Alicorn, by his ravishing good looks. I burst out into silent laughter. Oh, Disarray, you whimsical bastard, you! Indeed. Luckily, Daring Do caught on just as fast. Okay, then. So, Disarray, you can turn into a pony? Well, sort of. Disarray pulled back one side of his cloak, and I could clearly make out the stormy gray feathers of his wings, carefully tucked against his body underneath his tie-dye garment. I might have renounced my crown, but I'm still royalty by blood. It shows. Hence this marvelous covering. He gave the cloak a dramatic swirl. I feel pretty, oh so pretty, sang the hybrid, before he quickly hid his wings from sight once again, before any pony could notice. Why exactly are you here, though? He shrugged. It gets lonely. Thought I might mingle a little bit in the festivities. And what festivities they are! I heard the news, Fluffy. Reinforcements on the way. My dear old dad imprisoned once again. These ponies have much to celebrate. Any further conversation was interrupted by the appearance of a server popping up at our table. "Welcome, every pony," she said brightly. May I... She broke off as she noticed me, leaning back into the booth, arms crossed, regarding her with an even stare. It was a look I'd perfected by now. I'm sorry, but we don't serve your kind here," she managed to nervously stutter. Oh! Oh, no! Oh, that's sad. Poor girl. Her eyes were flicking back and forth, and I could already see a few beads of sweat dotting her forehead. She kept a fidgety stance, never having her hooves in place for very long, as though she was ready to bolt. I almost felt compassionate for a moment. Almost. "That's quite all right, miss. I can sate my appetite on the feast already laid out for me." I picked up a fork and sniffed it delicately, before clamping down on the prongs and biting through the metal like paper. I chewed it up and swallowed, giving her a wicked grin. Ironically, it was actually pretty tasty. Then again, I'm sure your employer would be quite skeptical of whatever story you gave them regarding the missing silverware. I popped the rest of the fork in my mouth. Whether it was the fact that I'd just eaten solid metal, my unused method of communication, or even my appearance in general, she folded like a house of cards. "This guy's good. He's a good psychologist." Are you ready to order?" "Got anything to drink?" A few bar items. There's hard cider, a few wines, or a berry cooler, sir." "Ah, so they do have some forms of alcohol in Equestria. Perfect. I'll take your biggest container of cider. And if you've got any gems, I'd like a ruby, please." Disarray spoke up next. "I'll take a bottle of your finest blue wine. Oh, and I'll have one of those veggie shish kebabs I saw over the fire pit. Por favor." The server once again looked nervous. "I'm dreadfully sorry, but we're on our last piece of firewood. We simply can't put anything else on this fire spit." "Oh, not to worry," said the hybrid. "Here, take Plank. He's been nothing but a bother lately. He just talks and talks and talks. Ugh!" He hoofed her the innocent hunk of wood, which she regarded somewhat suspiciously, before simply sighing and turning to the last member of our group. "And for you, Miss Dew?" "I'll take an Appaloosa ambush on the rocks, and a hayburger for the main, please," the explorer answered smoothly. "Excellent. I'll have your orders out in no time." She paused as she saw me hungrily eyeing a spoon. Or immediately. Yes, at once." The mare nervously laughed before moving away as quickly as possible, taking the innocent 2x4 with her to a certain doom. There was a silence for a few seconds. "Well, that was fun," chirped Disarray. I shrugged. After dealing with the Diamond Dog stigma for this amount of time, the sting was beginning to fade from incidents like that one. But it still irked me. There were no others of my kind in the area, and apparently there hadn't been for many years now, thanks to the apparently genocidal mayor of Wethoof. One would think that hostilities towards us would have faded by now. "So, Echo, what was it that you wanted to tell me?" asked Daring, eager to get away from the awkward feelings created by the server. I began reiterating the events of a few hours ago, and quickly brought her up to speed about Captain Tithus's plan to exterminate the Hydra, the promotions of Baritone, Sparky, and Cloud9, and as much as I could about the meeting in his office. The food arrived rapidly, and we all tucked in as I continued my recounting. I thoroughly enjoyed the keg of cider brought out for me, and even though I downed an enormous amount, I only felt a small buzz. Apparently, my body was not only resistant on the outside, but internally as well. There was, however, some questions that arose. "So let me get this straight," mumbled Daring through her hayburger. "Tithus wants you to work with the mayor who almost killed me, and you're going along with it." "I put the entire town in danger. Of course I have to help. You may be dear to me, Daring, but you're still only one pony. There are quite a few here that I am responsible for now." She sighed. "Whatever. Say, how did you even get through the gate?" She doesn't know. I took a look at it a few days ago and it looked burnt. Is that why Typhus needs your help? Because you can do that? To answer, I quickly scraped the claws of my index fingers together, and like striking a flint with steel, a small shower of purple sparks cascaded over the table. The claw on my left finger flared up with a soft fire, bathing the table in an eerie glow. I held it up like a candle and spoke with my free hand. That's how. She gave a low whistle of amazement, and even Disarray looked impressed. Whoa, was all she said. It seems you've somehow tapped into my power, Fluffy, mused Disarray. He was met by two equally surprised glances, so he continued. When your claws first broke through my prison, they encountered my being at its basest form. That of raw magic, pure essence. I can only assume that they soaked up a little of it, almost like very dangerous pointy sponges. I seized the flaming claw to extinguish it, and winced as it went out inside my finger. Does that mean I can use magic like a unicorn? Not exactly. He paused and took a bite of his shish kebab. As far as I know, diamond dogs don't have any magic to begin with. Or at least if they do, it's intrinsic. Like how an earth pony unconsciously influences plants to grow. No, this is different. You have magic, namely some of my essence, but you can't mentally access and use it. I was perplexed. I knew about much about magic. I knew about much about magic as a baby knows about nuclear physics. I knew about as much about magic as a baby knows about nuclear physics! There we go. So then, explain how I'm using it right now. I waved my paws around, carving the air with their glowing contrails. The magic in your claws isn't mentally activated. It's physical, meaning you can't control it or harness it. You merely, guide it. Think of them as lighters. The fuel for the fire is already in there. You just have to... Suddenly, Disarray sat up straight, eyes riveted to something over my shoulder. Get down under the table. Now. Excuse me? Now! He growled. The tone in his voice had suddenly changed from whimsical to steely. I found myself extremely unnerved by this, but nonetheless I complied, sliding my large bulk under the table and curling up against the wall. I barely fit, and struggled, and suddenly felt claustrophobic. I noticed something brush the tip of my ear, followed by a sudden giggling, and suddenly I realized that I was very, very close to the underside of Daring Do's belly. Well then, this is awkward. She reached down and swatted my ear away. Cut that out, she hissed. It tickles like crazy. I managed to shoot her a glare before Disarray quickly slid into the seat I had occupied a mere second before. From my new viewpoint, I saw the tavern from a baby's perspective, namely, the bottom half of everything. And it just so happened that 4 big pairs of legs, 2 pairs a snowy white, 2 pairs a dusky cinnamon, were now standing in front of our table. The white legs spoke first. Miss Dew, they said, in a masculine yet high voice. Miss Dew? This sounds like... They said in a masculine yet high voice, one that for some reason unnerved me greatly. It is somewhat curious to see you here alone. I was under the impression that you had a rather interesting traveling companion, yes? I heard Disarray give a slight cough, probably offended that he hadn't been included. Hello, Mayor, replied the explorer, smooth as pond ice. Shit! It's Frost Nap! I'm afraid that you won't find him here. I think he's at the barracks, she continued. It's just me and old friend having a drink and catching up. There's no there. This is so confusing. It's just me and old friend. Okay. The slight rustling of her shirt was all the warning I got before she leaned forward to indicate disarray. I whipped my head back to avoid tickling her, and slammed the back of my head into the wall. Thunk! Ow, my leg! Said Disarray flatly. There was a terrible pause before he coughed again. Sorry, I get twitchy sometimes. To emphasize this, he gave a horrible flinch, aiming another kick at me under the table. Quite. Anyway, if you see your dog at any point in the future, I'd appreciate it if you could pass on the message to it. A message to it. Him, said Daring. Sorry, can't hear you over the sound of no pony caring. The two of the white legs suddenly came up, and two solid bumps were heard as he planted his forelegs on the table. Tell it that it's gone too far this time. I've tolerated its filthy presence in my town, the destruction of my gate, the only thing keeping these ponies from a very painful end, and even you, Miss Dew. His voice suddenly lowered in volume, but the venom in his voice increased tenfold. But no pony endangers my daughter. Not even that blasted washed-up sack of bones who calls himself a captain. The four cinnamon legs took a few small steps back, as if afraid. What was going on? I had to know. I risked a small peek out from under the table. I looked up to see the body of a pure white stallion leaning over the table, his face hidden as he continued his chilling message. A glance to the left, a real ginger snap standing nervously a few paces away. Her gaze flicked down, green eyes widening in surprise. She stated as if she were going to say something. I quickly shook my head, silently pleading. Ginger frowned, obviously wrestling with something in her mind. This calls for drastic measures. I resorted to the ace up my sleeve, the ultimate trump card. Even better than get out of jail free card from Monopoly. It's one little word. One magical, humiliating word. Please? That did it. Something in her softened, and she leaned back again, returning her gaze straight ahead. I took the opportunity to gratefully slip back into the darkness. Whatever it was that held her back, I wasn't sure. Maybe the camaraderie that forms between the guards. Maybe I just got lucky. Or even the odd look in her eyes. It was similar to the way she'd glared at me many times before. It was a look of pride, of something hidden, and of fear. However, there was a lot more of that last bit. And did she fear her father more than Diamond Dogs? So let me make myself perfectly clear, in case either of you traitors didn't understand me, Frostnap was saying. The monster leaves this town, and it does so tonight. His voice fell even lower, almost to a whisper. I'm not risking my daughter for anything. Even if that means the extermination of the Hydras has to wait, so be it! With all due respect, Mayor, if they aren't taken care of soon, you're all pretty much bucked. Disarray spoke just as quietly, although there was a lot more force behind his words. Sure, 100 of the buggers can't get through the walls, but 200? 300? At fully grown? Even Canterlot Castle would fall to that. I know these things. Oh, and how is that, stranger? Whoops, there it goes. Yep, my brain has stopped. I facepawed as softly as possible. Oh, Disarray! You silly filly. The mayor growled. I could imagine him shaking his head. Remember that we had this conversation. It's the only fair warning I'll be giving. And with that, the four pairs of legs turned and trotted away. I waited for a few moments, not daring to breathe, before exploding out from under the table. The coast was clear! Suddenly exhausted, I sat down in my former seat as Disarray switched sides again. I ran my fingers over my muzzle, smoothing down the shaggy fur. 1 + 1 is 1 on a bun, Echo, Disarray stated moodily. I sighed and picked up the keg of hard cider, drowning the rest of it in one massive swig. I need a refill. End of chapter 12. Magic. Oh. Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess it's time for chapter 13. Oh, it's 9:23. I'll be timing everything, I guess. 'Cause, yeah.